think you'll spot us hacking your business?
The Sour Hour is meant for the serious brewer. The Sour Hour may contain some seriously funkified content. The Sour Hour is not for the faint of heart. So exercise some damn discretion, would you please? Sheesh. And now, here's the Sour Hour with Jay Goodwin.
Time again, we're back in the Sour Hour on the Brewing Network. I'm your host Jay, here at the Brewing Network studios in lovely downtown Concord, California. We've got Bevo in the house tonight. Hey, Bevo.
Hi, B. Yeah, she has to.
I didn't have my headphones on. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm shocked.
She had to fetch her mic from the
Shocked
trunk
to
of her
discover
car.
that there is gambling in this establishment.
Shut up.
Good reference, though. Good old reference. No? Okay.
No, I didn't get it.
Scott's here too. Hey, Scott.
Hey, what's happening?
And
Excited
we've
to get
got
more of this beer.
Topher Bain and Luke Hippa in the studio. How that was out of 10, rate that pronunciation.
That's an 8.
For both
Wow, an 8. He said out of 10. You did hear that, right? Not 100?
That,
Okay.
That 8 sounded like 9.
I.
All right. And they're from Wildflower Brewing and Blending in Sydney, Australia.
I'm surprised you didn't bring Rob in here so he could communicate with them in their native tongue.
No. That's,
Rob.
Nope.
to the point where, like, you know, his Jay's staff guested on the last couple episodes of the show, or two shows ago, and Rob, I don't know if you happen to hear Rob, who was doing his best Aussie accent, maybe the last guest appearance ago, I don't know, 6 months ago, and now every time Rob talks, I can't help, I think he's doing an Aussie accent. Like, are you doing the accent again? He's like, 9. I'm like, wait, yeah, you are. No, you're doing it.
Email us with feedback, especially with angry emails from Australia. Scott at thebrewingnetwork.com. That's just who to send those to. Loving emails from Australia. One of my favorite countries and continents in the entire world. Jay at thebrewingnetwork.com.
I think it's just okay.
Watch us on thebrewingnetwork.com/TV. Let's find out if Chris can see it now that we're up and running.
He said he's watching.
He is?
So,
Okay, good.
I'll wait for very mean comments. That's coming in via text.
Cool. Hey, mate.
At any time.
You can also listen live. The Brewing Network app, search BN Mobile on your search bars. Subscribe and leave feedback. And I'm talking slowly so Scott can load this up on Apple Podcasts or wherever you find podcasts.
Rainbow Wheel of
And
Death.
with that, it's time for Review of the Week.
This is from Better Than the Session, a 5-star review. Sorry, no, that's the title. It's Roloff J. He says, great show, very informative, fun guests. Need to get Levi on from Funk Factory. All right, word to the wise.
Pizzeria.
And then he says, no need for RB staff shows. Those are beyond painful to listen to for more than 5 minutes. I use the golden sour recipe for my mixed culture beers. Thank you for sharing. So a very rangy review from Rollhoff J. Thank you.
I feel validated by that. It's like, good job on the recipe,
He loves your
Jay.
golden sour.
What are you doing?
He loves Funk Factory, and he hates your crew. So that's a 5-star review from Rollhoff. Thanks, Rollhoff. We appreciate it a lot.
No comment. Speaking of things we appreciate a lot, we very much appreciate Wildflower for being in studio. They flew all the way from Australia just for this. They're going to fly right back tonight. It's great. It's a great honor to have them.
It is an honor. We appreciate it.
No, actually.
Big honor to be here.
Yeah. On that note, it's not usually something I say to guests because it's going to come off a little rude, but why are you guys here?
I mean, I won't lie. I mean, the invitation to come and be on the show was a big component of that. At this time, though, in like we're here for a festival that'll happening down in Southern California, put on by Firestone Walker Brewery, just a small local brewery somewhere here in California.
Yep.
And
805 area code. I believe.
yes, somewhere around there. They have last year, and this year will be the second year, pulled together this group of brewers from around the world who are utilizing wine grapes in their beer. And the festival specifically highlights a sort of a special recipe and process that they'd like everyone to follow in making a beer that I guess that they call the festival's called the Terroir Project Festival, and the focus of the beer is to ferment wort with only the native yeast and whatever else might be on the skins of the grapes when they come in to the brewery. So we're here for that, and we made a beer for that occasion. We'll be pouring it on Saturday.
Excellent. And just so happens we have 2 wine grape beers open in front of us right now.
Perfect
That's
timing.
called hosting, Scott. See that long setup?
I'm feverishly scribbling notes on how to do it better, because that was an incredible
and
example
that's where your
you've
mic
set.
button is there. If
Yeah,
you want to
I
turn
failed
it
to
on.
press it. Yeah. I took a cue from you. You pressed yours like a pro.
Yeah, because I press my own buttons.
That's right.
No, that's why you get paid the big bucks. So we got 2. We've got a side by side here. They look different. So how are they different, Luke?
One utilizes Semillon, so a white grape, which we source from quite a famous winery in New South Wales, which was Tyrrell's. And the second is a black muscat, so more commonly used as a table grape. But that came from a Thornbrook orchard out in Orange, where we source a lot of other fruit for our fruit beers.
Okay. And you know, I'm sure you have a good sense of the different grape growing regions in Australia. What are kind of for those who haven't been or would like to go, you know, what are the strong regions? What are the strong varietals that are kind of around you guys down there?
So the Hunter is again, it's world-class Semillon. It's quite a dry climate. So typically the Semillon itself, high acidity, typically gets laid down in bottle for 5 to 10 years before, I guess, the style really hits its straps. But in saying that, the younger versions are really beautiful. Lots of citrus, really clean acidity, and for us that felt like it could have been a really wonderful marriage with the yeast characteristics that we get. But at the same time, a little unsure, citrus on citrus, acid on acid.
Yeah.
Maybe that wouldn't work, but we've been really, really pleasantly surprised with the results.
Awesome. And, you know, I think that's a good point with the citrus on citrus, acid on acid. What to you makes an attractive grape varietal for this type of beer? If you can kind of like, you know, build your ideal white, build your ideal red to like overly simplify things, what is a good match, and then how does that jive with the reality and the locality of what you have available?
But the Semillon, for example, that's probably a beer that we've been most happy with. In sense, we love it so much because we can see the wine aspect of the beer, but also the beer characteristics, and the way they interplay with each other is really beautiful. So it's not like any one is dominating at any one time. As the beer sits in the glass, you'll see a little bit more honeyed or pear skin coming from the fruit. Other times it'll be that strong sort of Meyer lemon or lemon meringue coming from the beer. So I don't think it's necessarily important to have beautiful aromatics or really, really strong fruit character coming from the grapes. I think if you can get your ripeness in a lovely spot, where it's just obviously not going to be too boozy, but again, it's not going to be too tart, or the flavors have ripened, then that probably is probably what we feel is probably more of an indicator. It's fantastic. Like the black muscat is the aromatics are amazing. They're really lifted. It's perfumed. It's sort of Turkish delight. That is indigenous to that grape. So naturally, having that come through in the beer is wonderful. But that certainly wasn't the be all and end all of the reason we wanted to work with that fruit.
Sure.
So I think if the beer and the fruit in some way in your mind can feel like that will marriage, then it's certainly worth an attempt. We'd love to play with Gamay. We have played with Gamay. We talk about Shiraz a lot, another really common and easily accessible and really well grown fruit. But until we use it and put it together, you sort of it's a pretty big unknown.
Yeah.
And then in saying that, I think that's probably the most surprising thing about this Semillon. That wasn't one that there's nothing about this Semillon fruit itself which is particularly mind blowing. So I think that's probably been the biggest surprise since using it.
So that's interesting. It's more than so the flavor profile, the aromatics need to work in your mind first, right? That's the kind of
there needs to be
first
something
step.
there. Yeah.
But then the ripeness factor is something you play with. Is there a ripeness that is more ideal for the beer than there is for the winemaker that you would prefer, or how does that work?
Yeah, but again, looking at those two beers in case, the Semillon we pushed it a little bit further than what you would have if you were harvesting for wine, and I think with the muscat itself, we could have looked for a little bit more ripeness with that.
So they're different regions and
Correct,
different
yeah,
times,
yeah.
but then also on the varietal, there's different reasons to do that.
Yes.
I think just kind of directing that.
Yeah. Not sure that I've lost that.
Oh yeah, for sure. So you're kind of trailing. It sounds like both were trailing behind the ideal ripeness for the winemaker in this case, but it kind of just is very dependent on what you're looking for, but probably also working with the vineyards as well, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So we the winemaker there, Chris Tyrrell, he was doing a lot of analysis for us, and we had a sugar level in mind.
And acid and
yeah.
pH. Yeah.
So when those things came together, that was it. We pulled the trigger and we went out and harvested. We probably had a little less control with the black muscat. But in saying that, we're really happy with the result. But I think if we were to use that fruit again next year, we'd certainly, like I said, look to push a little bit more ripeness, just to give that a little bit more body, so a little bit more of the wine character coming through on the palate, not just all about the aromatics of the fruit.
I mean, I guess one of the reasons you would be kind of as a winemaker, you would be trying to look at this axis, especially if you're doing a no ads winemaking, or you're not going to be adding any acid to your wine later. The axis that you're looking for is the right level of ripeness, so you're going to get your right alcohol level in your finished wine, as well as not losing too much acid in that ripening stage. So as generally and depending on your region and depending on how cool it is that at night that harvest, acid will on a large scale, and not if I'm correct, decrease as ripeness increases. Yeah. Okay. So I was just checking that with Luke because I've never made wine. But
Silently signal
he
your
was looking at
agreement.
me, and I said yes.
Oh yeah. Jay was definitely nodding in accord. We found that because our beer has the acid, the ripeness of the fruit can still carry. Like we can allow that to get a little bit further along while still maintaining some of the integrity of the finished product. We're not so worried about losing organic acid to ripeness because we have that in the base beer. That being said, so the first time we used wine grape beers was in 2017, and this beer is called St. Florence. It's named after my daughter. I mean, being a family brewery, we didn't want to go. We are a family brewery, and we're owned entirely by me and Chris. And each of the fruit beers is named after our kids. That way we don't go crazy on either side. That being said, Chris just had his fourth, and I'm about to have my second pretty soon. So this year we had 4 beers made with any kind of fruit, and next year we'll increase that to 6.
Congratulations, you guys.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
But Florence,
They're all still alive too, despite being saints.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, just wanted to throw it out there.
We hope that maybe sometime in their lifetime they will exemplify some saintly characteristics, but
Why not?
most of them are very young.
Or hopefully
and
they'll
are
just move
pretty-
out at 18.
Yeah,
I mean, keep our expectations reasonable.
We made this beer the first when my daughter was born, so 2017. And the fruit that we used in 17 was again from a cool climate growing region in Orange, near where this Black Musket comes from. It's a very different climate than the Semillon beer now. But it came from a vineyard, and we essentially got the fruit after they were done picking. They were like, oh yeah, we didn't end up using our Sauvignon Blanc this year. Go at those rows. So the fruit was really overripe, and I was a bit worried about that, but also probably didn't know that much what I was doing at that time. And it comes through still now in the beer when we open this beer, and it's been bottled for 2.5 years now.
How does it present?
Yeah, you still get a lot of juiciness from that younger fruit.
In a good way?
Yeah, beautiful. It's really funky as well. I mean, a lot of fruit beers, extended period of time, has a lot of funk, but the overripe fruit seemed to have worked. And this was before Luke joined us at the brewery. We had made this beer, and so we continued talking about fruit ripeness because of that. So the next year, in 18, we worked with Pinot from this same vineyard as the Sauv, but we worked on a very small plot with really underripe fruit. I think it was like 9 or 10 Beaumet, like really sort of, we picked it early. The vineyard actually, long story, but the vineyard actually had a bushfire happening nearby, and so a lot of their fruit got tainted, so smoke taint. So they didn't end up picking, and they picked some of this stuff early to send off for testing, and then they had all these bunches, and they said, do you want to use these? And we said absolutely, because we wanted to see what underripe fruit would lend to the beer. So we did a process that we always do, a 3-week carbonic maceration just on the whole bunch fruit before we added any beer, and then we added some gold, our base beer, after 3 weeks. We made that beer, and then concurrently we allowed a different clone, but also Pinot from the same vineyard, to ripen to a really good spot. I think that was probably our that fruit we ended up making a bit of wine with as well at the brewery.
You would have picked it for
rosé.
a table wine.
Yeah.
That's 12.5, 12.3 Beaumet.
Yeah. We don't know
Probably
what that
means
is in
nothing to anybody.
bricks. Yeah,
Sorry.
but anyway, yeah. But it was at that kind of correct axis of ripeness and acid to make a wine with. And we made our St. Florence beer last year with Pinot Noir, and made it in the exact same process as we had with the same fruit from the same varietal from the same vineyard as an underripe beer, and the results are completely different. Color won. The less ripe beer has hues of pink, but the St. Florence Pinot Noir 18 is purple, like a crimson red, is beautiful color, and then across the palate, I mean you get more. I find a bit more structure in the 18 Pinot, and a bit more juice in the WB Pinot, the whole one. The less ripe one. But very, very different. I mean, the less ripe one certainly wasn't something that we wouldn't do again. It wasn't like, oh, this is, we're not coaxing the amount of varietal influence that we want out of that. And we are with the ripe ones. I think just with ripe ones, with more ripe ones, we found that they possibly are giving more of a fleshy character. So less of that linear kind of, sometimes with the younger stuff, it's kind of a unidimensional fruit character. Whereas when we let things get a little bit riper, and because our beers, these ones specifically, spend an extended amount of time macerating on skins, and we go through the effort of harvesting it by hand and choosing out, nice, beautiful bunches, the riper fruit, we get more texture. I would say, just on an absolute whole, more texture, and there's a bit more savory characteristics in there, as well as all of the fruit from the varietal influence.
So between the initial concept of choosing the varietal, let's say that's step one, to, kind of choosing when, choosing the profile of the sugar and the acid, let's say that's step two. And then 3 is when you get the grapes in-house, what you decide to do. How do you decide to introduce that to the beer? Could you walk through kind of which of those levers are the biggest kind of flavor inducers? I know there's a lot, they kind of all, it's very dependent on, which varietals you're talking about and regions and stuff like that. But what have you seen as the biggest effector of the flavor impact on these beers that you guys are making?
You might have to take that. So I think the biggest factor is certainly the varietal. I mean, whatever we do downstream, we can't make a Sauv Blanc beer taste like one that's made with Shiraz. Like it's just not going to happen. So the overarching character will be that. The beer that we blend for these beers, like the beer that we end up choosing to macerate and re-ferment on them, are generally pretty neutral. We're not trying to matchy in terms of flavors. We want the fruit to really be the highlight of that, but we want to maintain its non-jamminess. Let's say, like we don't want to force that to a level where it's too intense. We want to keep the beer flavored beer, right? And that's why we're talking about the Semillon as being a really beautiful marriage. The thing that we work on a lot, and what I feel is very important for expressing the varietal, is how that fruit's handled when it does come to the brewery. So step one for us is sourcing the fruit, and we've only worked with vineyards like that at this stage that we know. We have direct contact with the people that are harvesting, and or we're going to. We haven't picked one of the fruits that ourselves, like one of the grapes, and that we've used in this. So we have our level of control over where it's coming from, the source, and the time of that. And even if we're not going to be the ones
physically picked?
Yeah, we're
yourselves?
physically going and driving out
Okay.
there. Harvest is a really busy time for us. It starts December and goes until May, basically, end of December, because I like to receive the fruit whole, fresh. This is a really important part, I think, of our beer. Whole, fresh, and directly from the vineyard or orchard that we're getting it from. Drive it back to Sydney, whether that's an hour and a half or sometimes a 3-hour drive, and then get it into beers as soon as we can. I think with the wine grape beers that's important to be able to start the handling process that we want. So we hand harvest, and that was sort of we go in and pick the whole bunches ourselves, and that way the fruit can stay whole before we receive it. So instead of machine harvested fruit can be a bit macerated and possibly already broken, but like specifically for wine grapes before they come into the brewery. And we adopted, I think, in 2017, and have done this with all of our wine grape beers that we've released so far, a sort of same method, a Beaujolais winemaking technique called carbonic maceration, whereby we bring in the fruit, whole bunch, put it into a stainless steel vessel, a sealed stainless steel vessel, and then we inject a small amount of CO2 into the bottom of that vessel, and then leave an airlock on the vessel, but otherwise seal it up to ingress of oxygen. And over time, the yeast that's resident on the skins of the berries will transfer through the skins and start fermentation of the wine grapes inside the berries themselves.
Whoa.
So the CO2 inside the berry might explode the berry, and when that happens, the juice might fall to the bottom of the fermentation. I'll let Luke talk to the characteristics of why you would do the flavors of carbonic maceration, but physically, in terms of how it's done, we put in the CO2. The wine fermentation starts native, like on its own native yeast, on its natural yeast, and again, that's something I think is quite important to allow the Saccharomyces that's on those skins that's most adapt to fermenting those kinds of those kinds of sugars, fructose, to be the ones to start that fermentation. We want this co-fermentation of, finally, when we do add the beer, I want that Saccharomyces that knows how to ferment fructose, the sugar in wine grapes. I want that to be present and active. So we're letting that start. We allow that process to go for 3 weeks. This is before we even see beer, and I think for all of our beers, it's always been 3 weeks. About 3 week carbonic maceration. And then any of juice at the bottom of that fermentation at the end of that 3 weeks, so from exploding berries, we'll drain that off, and we might keep that as wine for ourselves, or maybe make vinegar at home or whatever. We're quite lucky in Australia to be able to make wine and cider and beer in the same space, so we'll drain that off, because for me that's just additional sugar that would be adding more alcohol to the beer that maybe we don't need. So we drain this fermenting wine at the bottom, but the fermentation's not finished, and there's still plenty of sugar in those grape skins and in the berries that haven't burst. So then we blend our aged beer. We'll select a certain number of barrels, maybe 3 or 4 barrels of gold. All of our wine grape fermentations have been with our golden beer, and then the two will macerate for a minimum of 3 months. The Semillon beer was 4.5 on skin, so that whole time the beer is in contact with the skins and the whole bunches and the stems as well. We don't destem the fruit. Basically, like I said, I like to streamline things. I'm a lazy brewer. But also, if we can source the best fruit, we shouldn't have to handle it very heavily. And I think that's probably the best expression of the vineyard or the orchard that we're getting it from. But flavors of Cab Mac, you'd have to talk to Luke. But yeah, sorry.
I'm fascinated by this idea of the fermentation happening within the berry but like, it's penetrated the skin, so the berry looks whole, but there's a fermentation happening inside the berry. Now, I'm assuming there's no way for that fermentation to happen without it eventually bursting through the skin, right? I'm imagining like biting into what appears to be a whole berry, and then like, oh my God, there's wine inside.
It's a wonderfully fizzy.
Does that happen?
Sweet. Yeah.
Really?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's
Have you ever
amazing.
left like a half-empty bottle of fresh juice in your car? Or something like that, and then it just starts
exposed?
going
The
like
bottle's
this,
expanding?
and then it's like,
No,
kaboom.
I usually, my car is
less
not
elegant than
the-
what we're talking
the
about here.
pigsty
but-
that yours is. I generally tend to clean
Well,
my
that's for-
garbage out of
that's
it.
for sure. That's for sure.
Jay's
let's-
like, you ever spill milk under your passenger seat and then it's like smells so bad you can't drive your car? I'm like, no. I don't know. I don't know that.
Shockingly close to the truth, Scott. But transitioning off terrible flavors of my car, what is the flavor impact of this process?
So predominantly you get a much. So in where it's done most commonly in Beaujolais, they're working with Gamay as their varietal. So across the board though, you get a much brighter, juicier aromatic. So that really pops out of the glass. And it certainly helps reduce the tannin perception on the palate. So that berry is fermenting in itself. It hasn't been broken. You're not releasing the phenolics and the tannin from the skin into that fermenting juice. So again, that stays a little suppler and a little less aggressive across the palate. So again, that in itself works really beautifully with the beer, where you're not detracting from the essence of the beer by imparting overly strong tannin structure. It's there, but it's a much gentler form.
Because Gamay, if you were to bring in and say, do like a 30 or 40% whole bunch ferment, but then destem and crush the rest of it, would be a pretty ballsy wine.
It'd be a big wine,
Yeah.
correct. But and it's very common in Pinot as well, and you get a really lovely sort of cherry liqueur character from those whole bunch, those carbonic fermentations.
Excellent. Well, these beers are very good.
Terrific.
And appreciate you guys bringing these. One thing I wanted to just throw out there, and maybe it's break time. Topher, you mentioned that you guys are able to make wine and cider in the same facility, same license, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I've always wondered about this process, as American breweries, how legal. And this is not a question. I'm just kind of throwing this out to the intertubes out there. How legal is it as an American brewery to, without a wine license, to do this?
Not.
You're essentially making wine. Now, does
You mean the carbonic maceration process?
does it
Right.
become
Yeah.
wine? No. Is it sold as wine? No, absolutely not. But there's just something
Question mark?
I'm not looking for an answer. This is more of like a cautionary tale to those out there. Like, you guys all know the TTB, your state regulations.
Question mark?
There's no need to put this on the bottle.
Yeah. But I guess,
Statement of process.
It can't be more than 50-50 or something, is that right?
Yeah, it's got to be 49%.
That's the limit.
Yeah. Or 49.9.
So will they come audit you during the process if you were like? Is it the released product or the process
Right.
that they would get angry about?
They would say, I don't think they're going to come audit anyone during the process, and you really can't after the fact, I think.
Statute of limitations, man.
But you do sign the process under penalty of perjury, and I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yep.
I'm not sure this technique is technically legal in the U.S. So, air quotes, don't do
Right.
it, everyone out
All
there.
regulatory infraction problems
You guys
shall
all
be
know what I'm. You guys all know
directed
what
at
I'm
Jay
talking about.
Goodwin.
You know what I'm talking about. All right, let's take a break.
Yeah, let's do it.
We'll be back with more illicit activity on the Sour Hour.
Hey, this is Andrew from Modern Times, and let me start over. Do I say 1, 2, 3? Hi, this is Andrew from Modern Times Beer. I'm on the Sour Hour. Please. Hey, this is Andrew from Modern Times Beer. You're listening to the Sour Hour, where skin contact isn't just a frame of mind. Okay, one more time. Hey, this is Andrew from Modern Times Beer. You're listening to the Sour Hour on the Brewing Network, and we care about hops too. How long does it take you guys to edit this shit?
That's what you guys have to live up to when we do the liners after the show.
The bar is high.
Andrew or low, like Andrew from Modern Times. That was the best one.
The skin contact is like that's relevant.
It makes skin
very on
contact
point.
regularly.
It's also raunchy. Yeah. We're back. It's
Good
Sour Hour.
times.
None of us are wearing clothes.
Yeah, as you can tell, it's show number 2. You can just picture Bevo's eye roll right now.
Yeah. I thought I was picturing something else there for a second.
She's all. Might as well just get like a couch.
She's laughing at a YouTube video she's watching, not us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Just like halfway to a nap, just like the most slouched in a chair I've ever seen. She's struggling to
You
get
just put
back
your feet up on the desk, babe.
I am trying to recline. It's not working well for
Oh,
me.
hey, take where'd this chair go? The squeaky one was reclining like crazy in here. You should
No,
take
that one's not comfortable.
Okay.
Oh.
I
Yeah,
have,
no
I have a
good.
particular chair that I like, but I need a better footrest.
Yeah. Yeah,
Take-
Andrew left, right?
Take it up with HR. All right. Are we on the air? Yeah.
I don't know.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
That was a real laugh for you.
Oh. Wow, genuine.
Oh, that's 2. I think that's my record.
for the whole run of the show, or this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I had one before going into today. All right, we're back with Wildflower. Did we get another beer? In the
Oh,
break,
let me
or
go
no?
grab it. No, I'll go grab it.
All right, you did. Oh, well, I was going to ask you for something else. But
What you want?
I was going to ask if we have any questions for later.
Oh, yeah. But let me get the beer.
Do the beer, and
I
then-
don't care about questions.
so I'm-
I have questions. I want.
Well, no, I need to.
Yeah, I have a question.
I need to pay some sponsors. So, all right. I always get nervous when Scott leaves, but I do have some questions for you guys. Let's see. I think are we already on to the hoppy beer?
This is
after
it, yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is not maybe it's somewhat relevant, but we were talking off air a little bit about how you guys, you're getting more, trying to get as local as possible. Beer with a sense of place, and we were talking about hops.
Mm-hmm.
Now you said maybe going forward, things are going to change from how things have been for you guys. So maybe give me an overview of
How they are.
how things have been and what the state of hops in New South Wales will be.
Oh, can I get to hops? And we talk about a couple other things quickly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in making beer, and with the origin story of the brewery, the idea was, like I said, I guess at the start of the first episode, to make beer from a place. And the ingredient that influenced our process the most was that yeast. And the yeast culture is a combination of a Saison DuPont strain that we pitched at the beginning. And then all of the wild yeast is captures from native flora in and around New South Wales. So I spent about a year going around and putting flower blossoms into unfermented wort. And if that's a process that's you're interested in, I write a lot on our blog, and there's a big post about that. But there's a number of people around the world who are doing that, and who have lots of tips and tricks and whatever for harvesting yeast from flowers. But that's also why the brewery is called Wildflower. I mean, is focusing on this culture. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Some people don't know that, Jay. So that was the ingredient that we were able to start with, and the brewery actually was initially meant to be on a farm. Local planning controls kind of stopped us from doing that, and so we kind of dropped back 10 and punted, to use I'm American. Dropped back 10 and punt, and started in the city with a model that, a work contracting model, very similar to how you started. And actually, you probably wouldn't remember, but before we opened, I sent you an email asking about stainless steel IBCs versus plastic ones, and you very much drove me towards the stainless steel one, because you can't put a forklift through a stainless steel one as easily as you can a plastic one. I think that was great tip. But
Can I just ask quickly? Do you have any idea what the reasoning behind the you can't have a brewery on a farm, that regulation? Any idea why?
Yes. How much time do we have?
Sorry, I don't want to derail you. I just wonder. I always wonder what the reasoning is behind these things.
Yeah, for the council that we were looking at, the zoning of that property was for rural agricultural production. So you could
It's just zoning. Okay.
Yeah, it's a zoning issue. And breweries have always needed to be in industrially zoned locations.
Gotcha.
I don't have an issue with zoning. Go to Houston and you'll see why zoning's an important
Sure.
thing. It's awful. There's no zoning laws there, and it's a disaster. Houston sucks. I'm from Dallas, so you got to say that. Yeah. But anyway, no, I don't have an issue with that. But it was frustrating.
I
for
got
us
you.
at the
Okay,
beginning.
so go on.
Yeah. So the yeast starting with
What other large American cities do you have?
it's so humid
Philadelphia
there.
blows, man.
The yeast was certainly the ingredient, being making beer at the time, was the one that was going to influence our process the most. So we started with this culture, and that was largely influenced by friends of mine who were working, and I had spent some time at Jester King, working with them for a very small amount of time, but then them becoming friends and resources for me was an important part of building that culture. And then we started with that, and the intention was to always bring on all of the other ingredients to being state-based, at least. New South Wales is a large state. Australia is a big geographical place, and we have lots of different regions, and we can grow a lot of different things. But I kind of wanted to build myself a box to operate in, and that way we can improve in the ways that we can, right? And make our beer better because of not because of different sourcing, but maybe because of different farming. And so we started off with always New South Wales grown malts. And as of next year, I'm really proud to say, and eventually we've always worked with an independent local maltster, Voyager Craft Malt. And through Stu, who's doing amazing work there, he's a completely carbon neutral maltings, whereby he uses the heat from a biochar facility, like the offset of some other facility, to do all of his malting. So he's absolutely not drawing down on the grid by doing his malting, which is a pretty intensive energy operation, to be honest. Through Stu, we're able to find a Australian certified organic farmer, but also more importantly, a regenerative farmer that's building topsoil, retaining water, and growing. He's growing for us in a heritage varietal barley, and some heritage varietal wheat that we will, as of harvest this year, so November, December, after harvest, we'll use that entirely across our beers. It's been a slow process to get that going. I couldn't just buy organic malt at the moment. The only organic malt in Australia comes from Weirmann over in Germany, so it just makes no sense to buy that. We wanted to work with local farmers and then slowly move towards the kind of farming that we want to see. We think it's more sustainable.
Than buying organic and having it shipped across halfway across the world?
Definitely. I mean, this like climate change is real, right? Like we need to like make our business sustainable. Not just as a, like, sustainability is like, bringing your coffee cup instead of using a disposable one, but like sustainable that we're operating in a few years, and moving towards farming that is more drought tolerant, moving towards farming that can happen even when there's no water allocations on an irrigated area. That's really important for us. And I think driving that story back to, not from the marketing thing, but driving the story back to heritage varietals of barley, and malt is a really, really important one. A lot of the malt that we see, the varietals that we see, and I can't speak for the U.S. market, but that we see in Australian market have been bred for extract, ease of use in the brew house, and huge DP, like lots of diastatic power. That way it can be exported to make rice lager in South Asia. All of those things. And also the ability to live through herbicides that end up killing all other type of growth in the soil, which is just awful for soil health and water retention. But those things that genetically modified barley strains have been bred for happen at the expense of flavor. So we see this with Maris Otter and Golden Promise, and having this like huge resurgence. These are not seeds that were modified for flavor. These are seeds that were found and replanted, and then a brand has come about that. And I love the fact that we talk about barley, at least in those cases, as a varietal, not as the type of malting that it is. And this is essentially the story that, like, in the process that we, while boxing ourselves in being a New South Wales beer as much as we can, these are the things that we can improve. We can't just say, okay, I'll go get barley from a different area. Right. I can't do that. I can't go buy. I mean, I've said to myself, I can't go buy Maris Otter, even if I wanted that nutty, beautiful, full malt flavor that you get from that, even while it might not have the best extract, right? Instead, we have to put that into the ground and grow it, see how it works in our environment, and then adapt the different varietals to ones that do end up doing better in our area. And this is probably where you end up seeing like that wine influence starting to come in to the brewery, and it was always an intention, but now we're getting there. Same thing with hops. So finally, if I get to the hops, I mentioned before that HPA, which is owned by Barth Haas, I have friends that work there, so I'm not gonna say anything negative about them. But a lot of the hops that are being sold worldwide from Australia are more IPA, tropical fruit hops, and that's great. That's good business for them. I buy very little hops, so do not listen to me. I mean, I can't be the smallest producer in the country and asking for something else. But instead, we've been working with a small hop farm in Bamboka, New South Wales, which is sort of a few hours south of Sydney. And they're another small family business started by a brother and sister-in-law, and they're growing hops organically on a family farm that was converted off of dairy because the dairy industry has been absolutely cut down to the legs, because people expect in Australia $2 for 2 liters of milk. So that's essentially buying $4 for 4 Aussie dollars for so $3 for a gallon of milk. Essentially, that's the going rate. Which if you think about something like milk, which is an agricultural product, has to get to market at a quick time. Something that's much less shelf stable than something like beer. It's undervalued hugely at that price point. So dairy industry was cut out, and this farmland happens to be in a geographical area that suits hop production. So they started a small hop farm, and they're planting varietals that work well for our brewery, and we've worked with them for the last 3 years. And this next coming year will be their third year of production. So they'll actually be at a commercial capability of being able to, we'll be able to source all of our hops from them. And that, like, while it certainly puts me into a larger box and I can't make the beer that's sitting in front of us now next year, it's something we have to do. I can't not do it. Although I might like this beer, great, I'll make it 5 times before they harvest their crop, and then that's it. I'm done, because we're committed to this idea of things coming from, at least from next year. Now it will be one single hop farm, and it'll be one single grain farm within New South Wales. Both of those farms being farmed organically without herbicides, pesticides, or glyphosate being around. And both of those farms, which is a kind of a new and trendy term coming up in the farming world, of being regenerative. So beyond organic. Organic is just taking away these harmful pesticides. Regenerative is thinking about soil health rather than the cash crop. So the movement towards hops has been a slow one as well, because getting commercial hop takes a fair bit of time. But they're planting hops that haven't been bred under contract. So a lot of the hops that you would see now, or that are kind of really sexy on labels, they're literally brands. They're hops that have been crossbred or sort of developed in-house by different hop farms, and then marketed and sold as such. And this is their IP. I mean, that's fine, that's totally. But the rhizomes from that are not they're not freely sourced. Our hop grower can't go buy Galaxy rhizomes. In fact, the only way that you could go get Galaxy would be to trespass on property, dig them out, and print them. I mean, that's
These statements not
hugely
endorsed by the
illegal.
Brewing Network or the Brew Barrel.
Hugely illegal. And also, that's the prerogative of these hop growers to be able to create their own brand. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. So the ones that they're putting into the ground have sort of lapsed in their IP. So we're talking Cascades, Galaxies, Hallertauers, a lot of things that work a lot better with our beer. And strangely enough, Saaz they planted a lot for us, and it's been one of the hops that's done the best in their region. So that gives me a lot of hope. But their Saaz is like completely different than what you get from Czech Republic. Sure. In fact, it has this incredible citrus side, so less the limey that you might get from Motueka in New Zealand, and a lot more of the lemon characteristics that we see actually in our beer. So really, really interesting. And for me, this whole process has been a way to, okay, we understand our process. We're a very, very young brewery. I'm certainly not sold in 100% of our processes, but we like the way they're making the beer. We like the way the beer is tasting. How can we improve that? One is process in the brewery, literally mixing things up, how we transfer beer, all those kinds of things that makes a difference. But the biggest part is going to be by driving that back, not just where are raw materials sourced from, how are they farmed, and what varietals are they actually? And that's a way to make beer better and more expression of our place, surely.
If I can just draw like a quick residential, tiny, small scale example of some of the concepts you're discussing, like I bought my house like 7 years ago. Here we are in California. Well, I wouldn't be improving it if I was renting, But the point is, the previous owner's house from the 50s, how along the way, all sorts of plants that are not native to this region were planted. That's very common, right? Of course. Not only do they not grow right, how much maintenance you have to do to make them, to force them to be where they're not supposed to be. Exactly. It doesn't even look right when they are healthy. It just doesn't quite look right. It's like if you planted a yucca in your front yard in Boston, it wouldn't look right? And so I've been sort of slowly over the years, putting in more native California plants, things that you find here normally. And A, you don't have to do anything. They just grow. And B, they just look right. It's kind of like a small scale example of what you're talking about.
It's exactly that same thing. And the fact that this is novel to us, it blows my mind.
I know, right? It should be the other way around. Like
Yeah.
the grass in our front yards is what should be novel, because that is what's novel.
Yeah.
Well, let
Yeah,
me. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, just you see like really green non-native grasses in an area that otherwise you knew as you're driving around is like totally dry.
Right.
You're like, think about the water that it takes to do that. Think about the fertilizer that they're spraying on in order to do that, and keeping down, broadleaf sort of weeds or whatever. And like, where does this idea of weeds even come from? Like, why? Like, that is in some sense like sold to us like that you can't have weeds, and really a diverse pasture is what you want. You don't want monocultures. Well, we're on a mixed culture thing. We don't want monocultures,
Yeah,
right?
exactly,
Like we can
right.
talk about
Yeah,
it.
Right. You
yeah.
do if you're King Louis and you want the Versailles to the lawns to look a
Exactly.
certain way, but somehow that trickled down. But the point is, like,
Yeah,
I'm with you. Like, I understand what you're
No,
saying.
this
It
is
makes
exactly
total
what
sense.
we're not off topic. This is 100% on topic. Do not
How dare
derail
you?
this.
Pipe down, Jay.
Yeah.
What is this, your show or something?
Well, I agree with everything you guys are saying, but let me just speak. Let me beat the straw man for a second. So
He's going to argue against points we haven't
Hopefully
made.
it's native grass straw.
yeah, it's monoculture. So you guys are improving process, and that's to make the beer better. And you want to work more with local farms, and eventually, I think we're skipping a big middle part here, and I'll ask for you guys' opinion on this, where eventually we want all this stuff to be more a sense of place than it is now. But we're also skipping a lot of the growing pains. I mean, it's great that the Saaz is tasting good or has great characteristics, but that's not going to be every grain, every hop that you're trying to replace. What about the concern about the intermediate time where there are these growing pains of trying to shift, because things don't shift overnight. You talked about hops, how that takes a lot longer than a lot of the crops, and I agree with the movement. It's just, how do you deal with the growing pains in years 0 through 2 or 3 or 5 or sometimes 10?
I think that question is really closely related to the question of how do you deal with drift in a mixed culture beer. We can't be making these beers from my philosophical manifesto of what we're kind of dealing with at Wildflower. Fuck. At Wildflower. Oops.
Here at Sierra Nevada, we really believe in it.
And not be committed to the raw product. In the same way, I can't make mixed culture beer with yeast from our area and then just throw out the yeast from my area because I don't like it, and then just go to a yeast lab and buy Brett Soir, because that's gonna make a character that I know is gonna be interesting. I don't think that there is a best of list. Like Jamón Ibérico is amazing. Like, it's just some of the best cured meat you can have. But I've never done this, but you could potentially farm your own pig and cure your own meat on your own land, and sure, maybe against some panel of experts who know exactly what Jamón Ibérico tastes like, and they're judging for Jamón Ibérico. Your pig grown in whatever area, maybe not eating as many acorns as the pigs do in Spain, will taste different to that panel, and they would probably choose the one that they know to be the flavor as the better one. But why don't we turn that on our head, and instead of saying that panels that are predestined to know what something would taste like, what does Cabernet from Napa Valley taste like? Well, the panels knows that because they've tasted thousands before that, and so they're judging against preconceived notions of what those beers are, what those wines are. In the same way, we need to be open as brewers, I think, with our customers. If we're asking them to support local, we're asking them to support independent. You've got an independent seal here in Australia, then we as brewers need to be doing the same thing when we pass that back. And our customers, as well as us as the brewers, need to be open to the fact that might change flavor. It's not always going to be the exact same, and we're open to the fact. The fact that we have a large cellar of barrels that we can essentially drift the flavor profile of our beer over time. It's not going to be one batch to the next. It's just a completely different raw barley type or hop type, it will take a few years for our cellar to be completely converted to these organic or regenerative raw materials. So we can slowly blend that flavor in, whereas that might be a little bit harder for a clean brewer, and I completely understand that. But if we are asking that from our customer, then we need to be allowing that to happen from our raw material side. We can't go to a supermarket supplier of raw materials and expect our beer to taste different.
Yeah. So maybe maybe incorporate your answer and rephrase my question. Is the plan then to, let's say we're just talking about the base malt you use. Let's say it's sourced from outside of New South Wales right now, or no?
It's not, but
let's
yeah.
say
Yeah,
wheat.
yeah, yeah.
The wheat.
Yeah.
The
No,
wheat.
no. It's all entirely New South
Let's
Wales.
do the hops.
Yeah.
Let's do hops.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So
New Zealand and Czech Republic at the moment.
0% from New South Wales right now.
Only in one beer that we make. We make a few, but yeah.
So
Majority not.
let's say that's that's going to develop with time, and let's say it's you're phasing it in. So the plan is, and this is all hypothetical,
Yep,
obviously.
yep.
The plan is next year, let's do 1/3 New South Wales, 2/3 from our traditional sources. Then we're going to flip it the year after that, and then we're going to go 100% after that. So it's like a phased-in plan. Is that what you would advise? It's in a vacuum and it's a hypothetical for people who want to begin to support, get to a place where you support local agriculture 100%, because that's where we want to go.
I don't know what I would advise because I haven't done it. We're just going to switch.
100%.
Just gonna
Cold
switch
turkey,
overnight.
going for it. Because there is something to be said for that too, because it's about you're putting the impetus on the problem, right? Not problem, the opportunity right away, where it's like, if something comes out and it's not, let's say, exactly the way you wanted it, and I'm being a little more pessimistic, but there's also some realism in there.
Definitely.
When it comes to agriculture and, we talk about turning the big cruise ship. You can't turn agriculture on a dime. It's like a big, slow moving thing. But the argument for going cold turkey and doing from 0 to 100 or small percentage to 100 is you're going to force the situation, and progress will come faster. But you're also talking about, people know that this is going to happen, and that's part of the local thing that you're buying into.
Yeah, the intersection of ideological drive and the practicality of the whole thing.
So we will the hop farm itself won't be sending their hops for testing, and we'll do that for all of our crops that we get from them. We'll pay for all of the. They're essentially too small to have the. We're not huge, as I said. We don't have heaps of cash, but I need to, as a way to mitigate the differences, especially with bittering and how that interplays with acid. We'll send all the crops that we get from them for testing, so I'll at least know alpha acid, so I can understand BUs. But I'm not worried about it. In fact, I'm so fucking excited about it. I can't wait to go 100%.
Yeah.
There's absolutely not a there's not a part of me that's worried about that switch, because I'm so determined. Well, sorry, not determined, but I'm so convinced that our beer will be better because of it. There's a fair bit of research in wine linking herbicides and pesticides in Saccharomyces fermentation, and you do see that these things break down, like glyphosate does break down in the beer. So you shouldn't be seeing huge amounts of trace glyphosate in any fermented product, even when it's using conventionally farmed fruit or grain. However, what those things can't quantify is the actual interaction at a microbial level of chemicals that are designed to kill and active fermentation life. So they know that over time it does dissipate and die away. But what happens in the meantime, during that interactive spot? So there's a scientific, I guess for me, pseudoscientific. I did study astrophysics. I'm not an astrologer, like an astronomer. I don't look at the stars to tell me how my day is going to be. But at the same time,
that's day one. You have to explain that. They tell you how to explain that to everyone else.
That's the difference between astronomy and astrology. But I am convinced that there will be a difference in the fermentations, and that's because of anecdotal evidence with winemakers who have made the switch as well. They've gone, look, our yeast is happier. The wines are a better expression of the place, and that's exactly what we're searching for in the beer. So I'm not nervous about it in the sense we'll do what we can to make the variability less, but the beer's always been focused on expressing our place. So this is just the natural step and the thing that we've been looking forward to doing for so long.
I think that's excellent, and I admire your confidence for sure, because I'm a nervous brewer. In college, I started a rap group called Nervous by Nature. Beva's not listening anymore. That was really just for her.
Is that real?
Such a bad no. That would be a terrible rap group name for college.
Paranoia. Hey,
I was gonna ask Scott to Google it and see if you could get some audio of that.
Yeah, don't Google me. We're gonna take a quick break. One more segment.
One more. Yeah, this is our last break. Yep.
We'll be right back on the Sour Hour.
Myself looking back at me, reflection, and all I could do was think about sleeping next to you. Look at your face, when all I could see was myself looking back at me, reflection, and all I could do was think about sleeping next to you. What would it take to make a woman like you a wolf like me, for what I really might be? Listening to lyrics only, here's what I allow. You gotta try to make me testify for hearing right now. Let's have a confrontation over a cold one. I'll give you conversation just to see if you can hold them. I play so dumb because I know some of these starstruck small talk art fucks is no fun. I'm the blood type that goes straight for the guns, like before you even spoke already knew what your love's like. So what you thinking? Because I'm thinking we should jump into your ocean. Let's go, girl, this ship is sinking. Look at your face, when all I could see was myself looking back at me, reflection, and all I could do was think about sleeping next to you. Look at your face, when all I could see was myself looking back at me, reflection, and all I could do was think about sleeping next to you. Now there's no reason to lie, I've had a lot of lovers. In my reality it's impossible to avoid it, but there's one reason for life. Gotta provide some supper, gonna build a family just to watch someone destroy it. Do you really think you wanna get to know me better? Don't you see the drama? Don't you feel the pressure? Don't get me wrong, it would be my pleasure to sing a song that could remove your shoes and your sweater. Bartender, let me get a shot of bean, cause this girl over here is trying to get me out my jeans, and she doesn't seem to believe I'm just another thief. Came to take a piece and make you stutter when you breathe. Now girl, you're too smart to be a tour mark. Set the play correct from the start with your pure heart. And when you're all alone, I sing into your phone. If you don't know the words, you can make up your own. The first time she met the devil was at First Avenue. Went backstage with him into the dressing room. Sexy ego trip, taller than expected, about 6'3", seemed to thrive on his misery. Critical, observant, big words, sweaty hair, sunken eyes, and thick nerves. She said I'll make him smile for the simple fact that he needs it. I'll make him smile just so I can kill it and eat it. You look like you were built for me. You talk like you wanna steal my drink. You kiss like you already came, and that's a lift or pull a line for those without any game. It's like, damn baby, you know you can't save me, but you should still tell your people that you're leaving with the band. Maybe you can show me your hustle. Neither one of us will be so lonely if only you would come over here and hold me. I caught you trying to hide your smile behind your glass, but all of your secrets become a swing set when you laugh, and all of your regrets that you're carrying or burying don't mean a damn thing if there's nobody to share them with. We've been following each other all night now. We ought to be all over each other like right now. I don't like crowds, let's take flight now, cause that face that you make reminds me of my life now. Look at your face, when all I could see was myself looking back at me, reflection, and all I could do was think about sleeping next to you. Look at your face, when all I could see was myself looking back at me, reflection, and all I could do was think about sleeping next to you. Look at your face, when all I could see was myself looking back at me, reflection, and all I could do was was think about sleeping next to you. Look at you. When all I could see was myself looking back at me. Reflection. And all I could do was think about sleeping next to you. Look at you. When all I could see was myself looking back at me. Reflection. And all I could do was think about sleeping next to you. Look at you. When all I could see was myself looking back at me.
We're going to learn to hear words with vowel A sound. Listen with care.
I'll be the analog arsonist, aiming at your arteries. All-seeing abstract, analyze everything. Adding on, absolutely abolishing. Average amateur's arsenal just astonishing.
We'll learn words that begin with
I'll
letter
be
B.
the big bad body rocking bomb, Beta Boulevard, bully black. Better bring a bomb to the battlefield, bloody black piece. Bringing bottoms that home, basically build barriers, bewildered buffoons.
Listen now to words that begin with letter C.
Crazy character, constantly creating concoctions. Catalyst of cannibalistic rhymes, conqueror. Correctly connecting craniums, crumble down, consistent capacity.
Next, we'll hear words that start with letter D.
Done did that, done did this, diddle don. Domination, no dignified diction. Doing it deep down, dialect during doomsday. That never stay during the duration.
Listen to our song for vowel E.
Extraterrestrial, electrical, effortless, eons of energy, everyone affected, efficiently, epitomize excellent, extravagant, elevate where the essence is.
F is the letter with which these words
Like Alicia's
begin.
got thought for the future, filling up things finally. Fabulous, furious, fatness, follow me. Makers fall frequently, fact, verbal feeling fired up, federally, foundation, fake, all of this whack shit.
Carefully again to words with sounds for letter G.
I wish they would dance because I want to see which one didn't have rhythm.
Rhythm sticks, rhythm sticks, get 'em. 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 Rhythm sticks, rhythm sticks, get 'em.
Go from elevate the great, create the styles that
Dwell within.
The flow will take you acres away.
Well within.
Sacred space, the place where we awaken.
Waking from this hell within. If you ain't heard about my crew, I guess I'll have to spell it then.
B is for the beat you knock while puffing on your
L.
L is for the lyrics on the beat that have to
Gel.
A is for the absolute that dwells everywhere you can't see. C is for creating, that is if you're in the K. K is for the knowing, which will bring us back to A. A is in another A and in another L. Me. I is in myself and me. C, cultivate and capture, put a cease to I. Ignorance, cause ignorance must die. Find a way, make us free. O is for the oneness that is you. U is universal, like the sound you're listening to. S, essence of the spirit in you.
Rhythm sticks, rhythm sticks, get 'em. 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 Rhythm sticks, rhythm sticks, get 'em.
Up and down the trails of many styles
We can go. What's it?
Store for the future, doubt that
We can know. What?
yourself we can create and
We can grow.
to be a vessel for these
Days. Touching
The moon and stars with such a
cosmic glow. Rushing
MCs that end up in the
hospital. It's nothing.
Sometimes that's simply how it's got
to
to
go.
go. That's if you suckers want to
Play.
It's such an creating
Feeling.
to be created.
Really.
It really makes me
Feel free.
Y'all think this ain't the
Real
real
thing.
thing? Then y'all just can't be
Listening.
listening to what my ears are
Hearing.
There ain't no
Way.
I'm pitching so twisted if you're
Hitting.
Nigga, it isn't
Pretty.
Witty, your inner
Dealings.
All in your inner
City.
I'll spit it when I'm
Ready.
ready.
Feeling deadly. Spray.
final segment, the guys from Wildflower flew all the way out straight here, direct to Concord, from Sydney, Australia, flying right back right after the show.
And they made the trip on like a single prop 3-seater, you know? So they
Yeah,
had to make
they
like
flew
25
their
stops
own
along the
plane.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
It's a long journey.
They did mid-air refueling, actually, like the president.
It took us a while to learn how to do that, but we've got it down now.
They use only organic fuel in their private aircrafts. I want you guys to know.
One
oh
more.
my God, such a yeah.
Yeah, you can't. You
Good
can't
thing to
fly
notice.
The fuel
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
refined in New South Wales, okay?
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure let that all fly. It's got one more reminder.
You're gonna let it fly?
Yeah.
Pun intended.
Yeah, boom. Liner and photo after the show.
Yes.
So I have a few more questions. We popped beer and we didn't talk about it last segment, so we're going to do that this segment. But first, I think we have a listener question, which is brought to you by Dr. Lambic and his team at sourbeerblog.com. Check out the articles on Sour Beer Blog for a great written resource devoted to... Do those get kept in? I don't know.
No, I clean them up. You sound like a pro when I'm done with you.
3, 2, 1. Sour Beer Blog for a great written resource devoted to teaching you how to brew. This is all getting left out now, I'm sure. And blend sour beer at home. And now the Sour Beer Blog crew is opening up a new brewery and taproom in central Pennsylvania. Check them out, Mellow Mink Brewing at mellowmink.com.
This is from Pete. Pete, we've done Pete's question on. I don't remember if we did it with the Rare Barrel crew or what, but this is perfect for you guys, Wildflower. Pete was asking about cash flow and the business model of the brewery where dumping is a thing. I don't think we've really touched on that, especially at only 400-ish barrels a year, very small production. How do you guys deal with dumping beer from a business standpoint?
Yeah.
I'm going to pass this one to my business partner, Chris. No.
Chris,
I would
we
like
have,
to have him call in about this. My phone might start ringing. So
we can do that on Skype now.
Chris really,
It's true.
Chris, my brother-in-law and business partner, he really looks after that aspect so that I can stay nitty-gritty, up to my knees in the day-to-day stuff.
Sure.
However, I can speak that was built into our business model, in a sense, baked in. We baked in 20% loss.
And where have you been in practical?
It depends on the year. 19, we've had a lucky we've learned from our mistakes in different winter brewing seasons. Sometimes we have had, in 18, we dumped around 6,000 liters of beer in a single month.
What's the percentage?
Well, if we're only doing 47,000 a year, like over 10% in just a single month.
In a month, okay.
It was there's been a number of times where you're having a small business, wanting it to be one of the big influences of how we make beer and the style of the brewery was the fact that both Chris and I are fathers, and Luke, who's now started working with, is also a dad. In that we wanted our work to come second to the fact of being parents, right? Focus of everything should be at home. So there's a fair amount of streamlined kind of, we have a modern packaging line so that we can start packaging in a day, label, bottle, and finish within a day and try to go home around 4 p.m. Sometimes that doesn't always happen, but that's our goal. So we can go home and cook or put kids to bed or whatever it is. That was a huge influence of the style of beer that we made and the type of the brewery. At the same point, we had to bake in these kind of losses, and there's been a number of times where I feel like mental health hasn't been at its best spot because you're having this brewery which is meant to support your family, but then the brewery might not be going well because we're dumping all this beer and because you made an error, and in a sense that can like drive back towards your personality and how you are at home. So we started with this idea, with this ability to be able to dump beer, and there's been at least 2 times where that hurts a lot more than I think it probably should. I would like to be able just to categorically look at a beer that's not there, dump it, and move on. But it always, it does kind of come back. This year, 19, we've learned from some of those mistakes in terms of being, the wintertime slower fermentations to start can develop enteric acid, enterobacter flavors, which we don't see aging out in our beer over any small period of time. Those are beers that we generally tend to dump, and we taken measures to learn from that. So we're dumping less beer this year than we have in years past. At the same time, we've also started working with some distillers down the road who are friends of ours. And when we do dump beer, we can, if the ATO is listening, the Australian Taxation Office, we totally sign it out of our register as alcohol goods and move it under bond to
they're
these other
listening.
places. Yeah,
They're
yeah,
listening.
exactly.
They're always listening.
We can send now the beer that we, quote unquote, dump, and it can be used to make spirit from our own beer. So
that's
I've
cool.
done that a number of times, and we've fortified a barrel of our amber up to 20%. We're just kind of seeing which is highly legal.
Oh.
We haven't released it yet.
How'd it come out?
It's really interesting. It's like fortified beer. Yeah, it has a lot of whiskey characteristics, but the neutral spirit shows a lot of character from fermentation. There's a Copenhagen-based distillery called Empirical Spirits, which if you're interested in yeast derivative and interesting malt characteristic spirits, I would look them up. They do a lot of like koji fermentations early and then ferment with known Saccharomyces strains from White Labs a lot of the times, and then spirit that. So you get neutral unoaked spirit, and it's a huge amount of character. So instead of dumping barrels now, we do send some to them. We'll just fill up an IBC or something like that, and we'll send it down to them, and they'll distill it when they get time.
That's cool.
And then we'll either use that for sanitizing around the brewery, or eventually we'll probably try to fill a barrel. We'll get one of our barrels recoopered and recharred and sent to them, and staying at their facility and making a oud de wildflower. Something. It's not a whiskey because it's hopped, but we don't have the same restrictions in Australia in terms of what's a whiskey and what's not. So it would be some sort of neutral spirit that comes from ours. So this idea of also having no waste is kind of part and parcel with how we do things.
So in the breweries run thus far, you've been below, at 20, or above. It sounds
Probably
like below,
15.
right? Yeah, right below.
Yeah, it just like some months were worse, but I would have to sit down and actually look at it all, but probably 15, probably on par with what we thought.
Fair enough. Do you guys think that for somebody putting together like a sour program plan or a brewery plan that's doing this kind of, like, that 20 is a good number to use?
No.
Okay,
That's
so
it.
moving along.
I would go high. I would go really high.
Estimate conservatively.
Because
30?
At least 25,
okay.
maybe even 30. Because, I mean, you're not going to know how your process is, especially in the beginning. And you're going to want to count on every drop of beer making a sale.
And it's selling immediately and being paid directly for that at that time.
And that's the critical time, too. My business partner, Alex, likes to say, reputation takes a lifetime to build, but only a few seconds to lose.
100%.
And it's critical at the beginning of your business for people to be excited and be like, boom, wow, this is so good, so good, so good. And not just like, oh, that first one was good. This one is awful. And then it's like, yeah, this next one was good, but that second one was awful. And like, okay, this one's good, but that spent $30 on that second one. It's just like it never leaves someone's mind.
Well, and even to put a finer point on it, I don't even know that it needs to be that pronounced. Like this fantastic and awful. Sometimes like, wow, this first one was really good. And the second one's like, yeah, I don't really know. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be awful.
We haven't because we've been building our cellar. Like we've been able to grow with our barrels. Now we're capped in the space that we have. In that time, since we've started, we haven't dumped any beer that hasn't been flawed, just not good. Like there's never been a barrel we've gone, yeah, you know what, just not fitting the profile of gold, good as gold, or any of the fruit beers. Let's distill it. That's never happened, but that will happen.
Sure.
As now we're full. What's happening in the meantime is like, oop, that's not going in a great way. We'll save the barrel, not the beer. Out it goes. That being said, I think that discussion was a big part. Our first release of beer, we blended like our golden amber, some pretty conservative blends, things that I thought had shared characteristics of things that I'd seen in the past, and I to this day I stand by those blends. I think they're really solid blends. This first ones that we made. We didn't release the second blend of gold, and I remember sitting with Chris. We were down in Melbourne for a brew conference or something like that. This is before we'd opened our tap room, and I couldn't tell him over the phone. I had to tell him in person. We were there together, and I said, Gold Blend 2 is just not there. Like, not only is it not good, like we can't release it. Like it's I don't like the flavor it is, and people have already assumed something from the quality of our beer, so I can't sell it. And it was a real, like, I mean, I haven't talked about this, Chris, but probably a bit of a test in our relationship as a brewery, of me being like, look, if he's got his money on the purse string, he's got his hands on the purse strings. If he says we absolutely have to release it or we're going bankrupt, then I probably would have followed suit. I mean, like that's an equally business decision as what it is. I mean, you can't make better beer if you're not in business, right? So he then looked at me and said, well, let's not release it, and you can, we'll put it back to barrel. He's like, do what you need to do with it, but sure, we just won't release it. And so that happened, but it was a huge weight off my chest, knowing that, one, like my brother-in-law had my back, two, that didn't put a huge amount of stress on the business or the family business that it was at the time, or that still is now, but that we were on the same page in terms of the business is focused on quality in the same sense of like the reputation. That second blend, if it wasn't to the quality that we've come to, I hope, expect from our beers, that we probably wouldn't be in the position that we are, which is none of us are like driving Jaguars or Land Rovers. Like we're not super wealthy, but we're in business, and I'm hugely proud to be in business 2.5 years later.
Amen.
Your most likely batches to go wrong are the first ones. So and they're coincidentally, or not coincidentally, they happen to be the ones you count on the most. Like the first one, you need that to come out, especially if you're doing this style of beer exclusively. I mean, you brew your first batch, you wait for a while for it to come out.
It's been only money going out
for a long time. And then you have the crucible of like, staring down your business partners, whether they be, related to you or in-laws or whatever it might be. Hey, I know you trusted me with all this, but trust me, this is bad. Like, and I'm gonna work hard to make sure it doesn't happen again, or it happens as little as possible. But we can't do this, or we're done. And it's a tough moment, but that happens to a lot of people. Except, sadly, a lot of people just go through with it. So that's tough stuff.
Yeah, maybe they find themselves with their backs against the wall, and they're like you're saying, they want to make better beer, but they have to be in business first.
Which is something I'm like, as being in business and operating, and I probably wouldn't have had that same outlook if I can just sitting from the sidelines, shooting pot shots from there. And now when I do see things like that, I'll pick up the phone. Just how are you going? Not call, not ask exactly, oh, this beer was faulty, but like, is everything okay? Like, how are things at home? Whatever, because I might know that person and know that that's not the quality that they tend to release, and then you have some sort of insight as to why that might be. And maybe it's not because they don't see it. Maybe they do, and they're not super stoked with it, but they have to have it. And I have a lot more empathy for that now. Maybe if anyone's listening, maybe just be easy on Untapped. Seriously, I'm dead set. Like, it's such a cool brewer thing to be like, I totally don't check that, and like I never watch, I never look any of that, and blah blah blah. That's bollocks. Like, it's
liars. Yeah,
I mean, you do, and especially when you're making these types of beers, and they're real representations of yourself and your ethos and who you are. And sadly, sometimes we wrap our personalities up in our jobs, and that's a real dangerous road to go down, because if you lose your job, then sometimes you can lose your personality if you're wrapped up in that way. But if you're making these types of beers and they do mean so much to you, then mean things on the internet can really gets to you.
Well, not only does it get to you, it takes one mean thing to undo 20 good things.
Hundreds.
Or more. Yep, 100%. Well, speaking of beer that wasn't dumped, let's get to this for the final couple minutes here. I want to talk about Too Easy.
Too easy.
Yeah.
Too easy is another Australian saying, jargon. Luke, how would you say
How would you pronounce it?
In your best Oka.
Yeah.
Too easy.
Oh, come on, that wasn't that good.
That was too easy, dude.
Come on, give me a huge Hackman, like.
Too easy, mate.
Yeah,
there you go. It's better.
It's actually hard serving this beer at the brewery, because people look it up. They're like, oh yeah, I'll have it Too Easy, and it's just so hard not to respond with Too easy. Like, it's so hard to go, sure, no worries. You can just switch to the other great saying.
No worries.
Called No Worries, yeah, actually. So Too Easy is a beer and kind of a series of beers that we've been working on that are focused on sort of highlighting the primary characteristics of our house culture. So we hop these beers higher, and Too Easy itself is one that's hopped with sort of New World hops, and we barrel ferment them to be sort of mixed culture. We call them mixed culture barrel fermented saisons, for lack of a better term, but that's pretty long. These beers we package in green bottle. They naturally carbonate and condition as they would the rest of them, but we're able to serve them a lot fresher. And these beers came for us out of a desire to be able to put our beer on draft a bit more and make something that's a bit more price capable for a lot of our friends that own bars and restaurants across the country in Australia.
Now is the draft, because I noticed that you've mentioned the green bottle, and
Yep.
even on the label #green bottle,
Yeah,
you've made
yeah,
it,
Bob
it's a
Sylvester,
thing.
yeah.
So the draft version is different then, I'm assuming, because the green bottle is lending characteristics per the green, right?
It's this. I mean, it's the same beer. It just gets split off differently between keg or a bottle.
Sure.
But
You're
I mean,
noticing
I think
differences,
if,
right?
If you no, because our beer conditions in box, so we'll put it inside a box and put it on a pallet, and then it conditions there, so it's dark the whole time.
Okay, so why are we making a thing about the green bottle?
Well,
I mean,
if
they're cool,
no,
but I'm wondering.
Have a look at the Saison Beer to Guard Farmhouse Ale Appreciation Society if anyone's on Facebook.
Okay.
And like for us, it's a real delineator of like, okay, brown bottle barrels, green bottle, those are the younger beers. Those are the quote unquote. I mean, mixed culture Saison. I mean, Saison's such a bastardized term, and I don't. It's a hard one to use because people associate with a lot of different things. For me, the green bottle is a really clear decision for us. This is not meant to be barrel aged funky sour.
Gotcha,
This is while those things, not the barrel aged part, but the funky and acid develop. Those are secondary characteristics of the fact that we're trying to make really drinkable beer. So that concept of Saison, let's say that, like that, coming from that place, but only having our yeast to ferment with. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yep.
These beers, the Too Easy, this idea of being able to have some more draft options because we're not very big, and our beer, we could sell it in bottle, and so the kegs kind of have to maintain that same price per liter, and that can be difficult on draft. So we made these beers kind of out of that purpose. And also to be ones that we can really enjoy at the cellar door. We do have a strange restriction. While we can make wine and cider at the brewery, our license only allows for us to sell products that we make on site. We can't have any like guest taps or anything like that. And this beer, these flavors have been ones that we've found. If someone does come to us and they're looking for a pale ale or an IPA, we kindly say to them that that's not what we do, and we explain our process and mention a few breweries in the local area that do those really well.
Listen, dumbass, go head over to Sydney Brewing, okay?
Yeah. They're an awful brewery, actually, not them. Yeah. I don't actually think there is one. But at the same time, we said, well, we can offer a beer like this, which is 100% in line with what we do, but shares flavor characters of more ale fermentations. Whereas when we get people that come in so that I don't drink beer, then the amber or gold they end up drinking. It's not a sense of having like a dumbed down option for those that don't drink beer. It's not at all that. In fact, it's kind of a funny middle option. So we like having them on draft at the brewery. The Too Easy beers are ones that we hop essentially like a hazy IPA. We use all of our New South Wales grown grain, and then we use a large charge of some sort of hop. With this one that we're having now is with Galaxy, so an Australian hop from Bushy Park. The exact hop that I'm talking about in terms of being super tropical, what kind of HPA at the moment, Hops Products Australia is really driven to producing a lot of. Use a lot of it in the Whirlpool, and then we also pitch. While we pitch the yeast, we give each barrel, and we ferment these in 3 500-liter punch ends. We give each barrel a portion of pellet hops at pitching, so at the same time as the yeast is going in, so hops into cooled wort in barrel. And then we'll also do a small mid-fermentation dry hop with that, so sort of day 2 or 3 of the fermentation. And then once the beer is aged, these fermentations generally around 4 weeks in oak. And then we'll rack out of oak into some sort of blending vessel, and then do a final dry hop before packaging. A few days. These are non-temperature controlled vessels, so I can't, like, it's just ambient, few day dry hop, and then we go to package with the dextrose. And then these beers generally condition for about 2 months before we release them.
Excellent. I think it's great. Great description also that it's kind of subbing in there for, the Pale Ale IPA. It's, of course, totally different beer, but for someone who's looking for some of those flavors but want your spin on it, I think that's excellent. I think, are we running out of time?
We are, unfortunately. I would love to keep going. I'd go all day with these guys.
Can I do a lightning round with the last question?
No.
No?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Quick answer, 1 word or less. Biggest mistake
Or
in
less.
biggest mistake in sour beer making. Luke first.
You can edit out the pause.
No, I'm leaving. This one is getting left in.
Maybe temperature of fermentation. Well, the you have to edit that out.
The aging. He's not going to edit it out. We've already
That
established
part I will edit out. Yeah.
It's unhappy yeast culture.
Good.
That's 3 words.
Unhappy is 1 word. 3. Oh, yeah. 3. Yeah.
Topher.
I would say definitely letting beer go too long. The beer can get tired, too oaky, too sour, and that's something that we really try our best not to do. It still happens, but understanding that each mixed culture beer, depending on the mixture of yeast or the age of the barrel or the age of the beer in that barrel, has its own window, and for us that's never been stable. We've never seen this ideal time for beer to be in barrel. Sometimes it's ready far younger than we think it is, and keeping an eye on that, I think, is the key for us, at least, and that's what I see.
Good. We're going to edit that down to 1 word.
Yeah, it'll be concise.
Yes.
I'm just teasing. Hey, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was great fun. Great information, great beers. Really appreciate it.
Fun hanging with you guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all of our sponsors. Love you. You make the Sour Hour go. As well as Scott. Thanks, Scott.
You're welcome.
And Bevo.
Thanks, Beaver.
Who's waving and thumbs upping. Thank you again to the listeners.
You guys can join in on the Stay Sour if you want.
Until next time, stay sour.
Or not.